Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tea with Che and Shai. I am joined, as always, by veteran political strategist Chaitanya Kamandori, and I, of course, am Shai-porn D-list YouTuber. Happy Pride Month. We're rounding up the end of Pride Month, and you had a little fun discussion on Che Day here on the death of the moderate Republican in Washington, D.C.
Right, and he showed some video that I had never seen where McConnell was talking about who his favorite Democratic president was, and he
Right. Well,
showed
the exact question was who of the recent modern era Democratic presidents would you want to be stranded on an island with? Carter, Clinton,
right,
Obama, or Biden? And he
yeah,
chose, he chose Joe Biden.
he chose Joe Biden. Joe Biden was friends with Mitch McConnell for many years. In fact, Mitch McConnell, I believe, was one of only two Republicans who attended Hunter Biden's funeral.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
I think the other one was actually might have been Lindsey Graham. But they were not. There were, and it was a private ceremony. Not everybody was invited, and those were the two that actually were
Right.
invited.
Well, Lindsey Graham, very famously, there's that clip of him speaking very warmly about the character of President Biden.
Yeah, I should say it's Bo Biden's funeral, not Hunter Biden's funeral. I'm sorry.
Right, right.
Yeah, Bo Biden's funeral. Yeah, so Lindsey Graham, of course, did not hesitate to attack Hunter Biden when the time came.
Right.
But he did speak very warmly at that time. Joe Biden has had a great history of friendships in the Senate. He was very much liked in the Senate. And I think you actually interestingly saw that during the 2020 campaign, where Bernie Sanders, I could tell very much that the fact that Bernie Sanders had a personal friendship with Joe Biden mattered a great deal in the relationship between the two men. Where with Hillary Clinton, where there was absolutely no friendship, and also with President Obama, where him and Bernie had a very difficult relationship.
Right.
Um, and Biden is actually to the right of both people, Obama and Clinton, but because Biden had a personal friendship with Bernie, that actually mattered enormously in that campaign.
Right. Well,
Um,
I mean, we saw that all when we were coming up. Famously, senators on both sides of the aisle would have these very magnanimous relationships. They'd be very contentious on the floor, and then they would go and have dinner or work out together, or all manner
Yeah,
of
and one of the
friendships.
things that is worth like thinking about right now is so Orrin Hatch, for example, worked on Chip with Ted Kennedy. And Orrin Hatch was very good friends with Ted Kennedy. Actually went to Martha's Vineyard or Hyannisport, I believe, is where the Kennedy compound is, and spent time with Ted Kennedy. Counseled Ted Kennedy to stop drinking. And they were just very good friends to the point that it actually hurt Orrin Hatch's friendship with Jesse Helms. It actually was a thing where Jesse Helms felt that Orrin Hatch was spending too much time with Ted Kennedy and was just not being a partisan enough. In the past.
I feel like anything that upsets Jesse Helms was probably a good life choice.
Correct. Yeah, it was exactly right. But the biggest. Well, it's interesting that you say that, but I have another thing about Jesse Helms to say a little bit later. But the thing is that if you look at the infrastructure deal right now, the
Hmm.
first thing that the Republicans took out of it was the child care provisions, the child tax credit, the expansion of the child care provisions for working mothers and working families. Why can't Republicans work on that with us? Why does
Right.
that have to be a partisan thing? I mean, if Orrin Hatch could work on Ted Kennedy on children's health care, Orrin Hatch's successor, Mitt Romney, should be able to work with Joe Biden on the child tax credit. But the reality is that Mitt Romney, quite frankly, isn't a moderate. He's a conservative who just happens to believe that Trump should not be anywhere near the Oval Office. So that is
Right.
precisely why
Right.
that
He's not a moderate so much as he is a never Trumper
correct.
or
He
never Trumper again. I guess the new.
Yes, that's exactly right. He's a never Trumper, but he's a conservative. I mean, in DC, Rob Portman is called a moderate for some reason, when there's absolutely nothing moderate about Rob Portman. He has like a hundred
Right.
percent Republican voting record. He's conservative on every single issue. There's never been any sign that he's in any way moderate. but he doesn't go on Twitter and sort of get into fights with Alyssa Milano the way Ted Cruz does. And
Right.
so we kind of
Right.
just,
Very, very important
yeah, we
policy
really,
battles with Alyssa Milano.
yes.
Yeah.
So,
Before we move on to your Jesse Helms story, can we discuss the madness of choosing wonderful Joe Biden, but why would you choose him over the man who has built 157 houses for Habitat with Humanity,
yeah,
Jimmy Carter?
correct. That's like the first thing when you would. So this is a desert island question. It's always kind of a crazy question
Right.
because like you actually, it's supposed to be like what are your favorite things that you would want to hear or read or spend time with over and over again. But it's actually the real how about things that would help you survive on the island, right? And Jimmy
Right.
Carter has built houses,
And as a
uh,
farmer,
and a farmer. Yes, exactly. It would be actually very useful in a survival situation. That actually would have been a really good question. But it's interesting. McConnell said that I would not pick Jimmy Carter.
right.
That was the first thing that he had said. Because Jimmy Carter has become such a hate figure among Republicans for such a long time. If you remember,
Right.
Mitt Romney compared Obama to Jimmy Carter, and the reason that we have the videotape of him saying, or the audio tape of him talking about the 47%,
Mm-hmm.
is because it was given to the Obama campaign by Jimmy Carter's grandson, who found it and was very upset about the things that Mitt Romney had said about his grandfather.
Right.
And
Well,
so
yeah.
that's exactly what that was about. But yeah, that's exactly right.
It's a perfect metaphor for the modern Republican Party of putting ideology before very simple common sense and survival of the nation.
Correct. It is exactly that. It is, they basically, I mean, one of the things that Mitch McConnell really has done is, Harry Reid said he just turned the Senate into a hiring agency for judges. That's
Mm.
specifically what he did, and that's the only thing he really cares about are these judges. He's just very single-minded about it. He's laser focused on it, to the
Well, it
exclusion
worked for
of
them.
all
Yeah,
of, yeah, to the exclusion of all other things.
they
And
placed over 200 federal judges. Is that correct during the Trump
yes, and I think
term?
one of the things that really hurt him was that Trump did not. I guess there was like something like 20 or 30 federal judges that Trump did not. Trump basically forgot to nominate. This occurred in December of 2020. They had to fill these vacancies before Joe Biden came in and would be able to fill the vacancies himself. So McConnell had asked Trump to do this, to fill these vacancies and nominate these judges. Trump just never got around to doing it. I think he
Well,
waited.
did he forget, or he was just too wrapped up in perpetuating the big lie of election fraud?
Right, that's exactly what's believed. What's believed is that he was so angry at McConnell because McConnell said in mid-December that Joe Biden won the election. A month after everybody else had realized that. But McConnell had done that, and so I think out of spite, Trump did not do that. The other thing that people say is that Trump was so preoccupied with the events that kind of end up leading up to January 6th and overturning the election that he just basically forgot to do it. But I think that I think probably both are true. But there was definitely anger at McConnell for that. And, despite all of those things, McConnell is not taking any real steps to stop another Trump run from occurring or Trump from winning again. He's not doing anything like that. He's certainly not helping Joe Biden and trying to change the overall tone in Washington that would make a Trump resurgence harder to do. The reality is I think that as much as he says it, he wouldn't mind having Trump again because he gets to have those judges again.
Right.
It's very clear that that's all that McConnell really cares about are those judges. Which brings up a deeper question, the conservative idea of using the courts to try to change social opinion on issues or try to move conservative causes. It's a very flawed idea. I think a lot of political scientists have pointed out that this is not the way that change should have happened in America, and it's not particularly a stable way. It's not a way of creating consensus.
Right. And ironic considering how much Republicans complain about activist judges that they claim are activists on the side of liberalism.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly right. But the reality is that they're very much activist judges on the conservative side, and you see it all the time. So the reality is that and part of it also is that the conservative movement has just become very obsessed with judges. It's
Mhm.
part of their enormous success. I mean, if you look at it, the Federalist Society, which was formed over 40 years ago during the Reagan era, has just been incredibly powerful. You now have 6 conservative judges on the Supreme Court as a result of their work, and then all the way down the federal judiciary. There was an attempt by Mario Cuomo in the 80s to create something called the American Constitutional Society, to create a counter to the Federal Society. That has been far less successful. In fact, they've had a hard time being funded and getting money. And at the end of the day, it's very clear that Republicans simply care about judges much more, and you can see that with McConnell, how single-minded his focus on this is.
Right. Right. Mm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really their last play, though, isn't it? With a shrinking electoral base, they have to go to the judge game.
Yeah, and there's also some discussion that conservatives kind of know that they've lost the culture, but what the courts do is they kind of slow down the culture in some ways.
Hmm.
And I think that that's something that conservatives feel. I feel like that it's possible conservatives are more comfortable with that sort of model of, okay, we're not going to really fight on these issues. We're just going to slow down everything with these courts. So, for example, if you look at the transgender bathroom issue in Virginia, the Supreme Court refused to hear that case, and they let stand Virginia's decision to allow for transgender students to use the bathrooms of their choice.
Mm.
That was seen as a huge victory for the transgender rights movement. And I was actually kind of surprised by that. I was very surprised the Supreme Court had done that. I assumed that the Trump conservatives on that court would have said, let's hear it and let's strike it down. And no, transgender students should not be allowed to use the bathrooms of their choice. But they didn't go that way. They went the opposite direction. So I think that that's actually a classic case of where conservatives are sort of allowing cultural change to happen, but just at a much slower pace.
Right.
By just simply allowing something like that to stand in Virginia. They're just not. They would not be in favor of maybe proactively forcing Oklahoma to do it, but that's kind of sort of their thinking on these issues. Neil Gorsuch, when he was being confirmed in 2017, was asked about the gay marriage issue, and he said, "No, it's been decided. It's been decided. It's settled. It's settled." Like he said, made it very clear that he wasn't out there going to out there to overturn that. Which was interesting because Anthony Scalia was just all about trying to figure out how to overturn that, and just hated that
Right.
decision. And
Right.
Neil Gorsuch was actually about 180 degrees on him on that, which is a sign of real liberal victory in the culture wars.
Well, I mean, that's also part of, I think, judicial culture, right? Overturning precedent is a very uh, taboo move by a judge in general.
Well, that used to be the definition of conservative jurisprudence,
Right.
was the idea that you allowed basically decisions to stand, and you only really overturned them if there was a really clear, egregious violation of the Constitution that had occurred. So that was really the only case. That was always really the only case where that's always been the idea behind conservative jurisprudence. But I think now, I think that the Federalist Society and McConnell and others have been moving much more in the direction of activist judges who will really get involved with fights and who will really insert themselves into the culture wars on behalf of the right. But what's interesting is that doesn't seem like that's actually happened with either Kavanaugh or Coney Barrett or with Gorsuch. Now I think Alito and Thomas seem actually much more in line with that type of thinking
Mm-hmm.
than the people Trump has nominated. But we'll see. We're going to have a very big test coming up here in the fall, where the Supreme Court's going to hear a case to overturn Roe v. Wade, and we'll have that decision in the spring, and that will probably be a defining political event of 2022.
Right. Yeah. I mean, are these Trump appointees just keeping their powder dry for the very large sweeping decisions? Um,
I mean, we
or
don't know. I mean, we
we
know
don't
that,
know.
for example, on abortion, that John Roberts, when he was asked about it, has always talked about how he respects precedents and he
Right.
respects legal precedent, and that's always been his answer. So it's always been my
That's
belief.
that's always the go-to answer during the confirmation hearings for judges,
Correct.
isn't it?
Yeah,
We
it is.
respect precedent.
It's very much that. It was very much that. there are a couple of exceptions to that, but it's very much like that's the go-to answer. Ever since Robert Bork's infamous hearing in 1987, where he really did get into the weeds about ideology. And but so when I heard that, I kind of always believed it on Roe v. Wade that Roberts was basically hinting that he would keep that precedent in place, but you just never know. You just never know.
So before we run out of time, what was your Jesse Helms story about?
Oh, well, because you were talking about bipartisanship. Well, it's
Right.
not really, it's a different party.
And friendships within the
Yeah.
Senate.
I do remember a Nightline interview Ted Koppel did with the Dalai Lama, and he was asked, and the Dalai Lama went out of his way to say that his best friend in the U.S. Senate is Jesse Helms, and I remember like nearly falling out of my chair at hearing that. But but the reality was that because Jesse Helms was this fervent anti-communist, he was absolutely no friend of the communist Chinese. If he was still with us, he'd probably be the foremost lab leak theory guy. But he was just absolutely no friend of the communist Chinese. He was very generous in opening up the coffers of the U.S. government to try to help the Tibetan people. So it was kind of a case of where those were very odd, strange bedfellows. I mean, on one hand, Jesse Helms is the favorite senator of Christian fundamentalists, but on the other hand, he was also the favorite senator of Dalai Lama.
Right. Right.
So,
and now we have Moscow Mitch complaining about that we're playing Russian roulette with the economy. With no irony.
It's a very strange argument to make, especially with the infrastructure money that isn't going to be out the door any right away. It's different from, say, direct payments, and
or tax cuts.
Or tax cuts, yeah. Well, that's the biggest one, is that corporate tax cuts. You never heard about those sorts of objections, but they do have objections to this. They definitely do.
Right. McConnell, is he the T-Rex? Is he the Dilophosaurus? Is he the genetically engineered Velociraptor in Jurassic World?
I don't think he's a Velociraptor. I think that he's way too. He doesn't seem like a guy who moves particularly quickly, to be honest with you.
Well, that would require working with others if he was a Velociraptor.
And there's no deafness. I guess so I was thinking the T-Rex, but the thing that kind of confuses this whole analogy is that the T-Rex in Jurassic World becomes a good guy, sort of. So, or at least a controlled villain. So I guess you would have to say he's that genetically modified beast that they create in Jurassic World.
He's Engine. He's the evil corporation.
Right. I mean, it's not like, I was going to say more like Godzilla, but Godzilla does turn into a good guy, eventually in the movie series.
Yes. Godzilla is just a force of nature. He's neither good nor evil. He simply exists to bring balance to the world.
Yeah, I guess that is
or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, thank you once again for joining us for Tea with Che and Shai. We'll see if this becomes a continuing series on the slow death of the moderate Republican, or if we'll have a new topic next week. But until then, for Chaitanya Kamandori and me, Shai Porn Turganstead, thank you and good night.